Welcome to DAExMachiNation. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you all for joining us on another edition of DAExMachiNation. We're going to have a great show for you guys tonight. We have got a very special guest, although I'm sure if you guys are familiar with the Dogman Encounters show. We have Vic Cundiff from Dogman Encounters with us tonight. But here in the studio with me on is Robbie Jed Rains coming. He's not actually at home. He's having to use the Wi-Fi in his squad car because he's teaching at the Academy in Columbia, South Carolina this week. So he's kind of coming to us from a remote location. Doc and Steve couldn't be here tonight, and before we get started, I wanted to say a quick word. Folks, remember to keep the folks down in Texas in your thoughts and prayers. Everything that's been happening down there. Miss Lene will be posting the links that they've posted to give to like VFWs and stuff like that. If you want to donate to help with that down there, I sent some earlier. Probably going to do so again after I get paid on the 1st. But she'll be posting the links so you guys can reach out to those charitable organizations if you feel so inclined. And one other bit of business I'd like to say real quick before we get started is we had kind of a blow today to the family here at the channel and the moderators. One of our longtime moderators, Mark Napier, passed away today. He lost his battle with cancer, and so please keep Mark's family and his especially his daughter, who's taking it pretty hard, but keep them all in your thoughts and prayers as well. But we've got a man that really doesn't need much of an introduction. If you guys are into cryptids in any way, shape, or form, you've heard of Dogman Encounters. It's probably the #1 channel out there when it comes to Dogman. And Vic is the voice of many an overnight long shift for me. Back when I was working graveyards and running squad cars all night long, a lot of times we'd have dead zones at night when nothing was going on, and those nights were filled with podcasts from Vic and some from Cam over at Dixie Cryptid, but a lot of Vic back in those days, because he was one of the only games in town. And I'm really thrilled that we've got him here. I want to thank Jeff Yarrington for that. He's the one that made that connection possible. But Vic, thank you so much for joining us, sir. Do you want to take just a moment for just in case somebody's been under a rock and doesn't know who you are? Would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Where do I start? Well, I produce 4 podcasts, all centered on cryptids. I produce Dogman Encounters Radio. I produce Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio. I produce my Bigfoot sighting, and also produce a new Dogman podcast called Dogman Tales. That's a fictional Dogman podcast. So I do those things in addition to my main calling, which is helping Dogman eyewitnesses come to terms with their encounters. People think that because of Dogman Encounters Radio, and for some people that's all they know me by, they think that's what I do, but that's just one corner of what I do. The mainstay of what I focus on and what I do is actually helping the Dogman eyewitnesses. And Dogman Encounters Radio, it's a pretty useful tool for helping these eyewitnesses come to terms with their experiences with dogmen, because if they can sit there and listen to this person and that person talk about their own experiences with dogmen that they never asked to have, that really helps them feel not so alone. And in doing that, it helps break down that prison without walls feeling that so many dogman eyewitnesses have. I mean, Sasquatch eyewitnesses, you can almost go to your local grocery store and find someone to talk with about your encounter, and you're not going to get laughed at. But if you have a Dogman encounter, yeah, it's a lot harder to find anyone to talk with about it. So that's why I thought there was a really big need back before I started doing everything that I do.
I'm glad that you do what you do, because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I got to hear a lot of fantastic encounter stories. I can totally understand how that affects somebody. I had a sighting myself in LBL, and it was what we would like to refer to as a butt puckering moment.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, that will get your motor running.
Yep. Same with DA. A lot of night shifts that I've listened to you, Vic, and it's one of those things that, like you and Cam were the before I was even part of this podcast or knew who DA was. I was listening to you and Cam. So thank you for getting me through a lot of long, boring nights.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for listening.
So what got you started in all this? Did you have an encounter of your own, or has this been something you've always been fascinated in?
Well, I didn't start all this because of an encounter I had. I'm convinced I had a 1,000-pound Sasquatch behind me, just feet behind me, about 45 years ago when I was deer hunting. But yeah, that's not what started all this. What actually did start all this is back in the day, in the early 2000s, I'm not sure if you guys were doing this at the same time that I was back then, but every night of the week, there was a new cryptid show you could look forward to coming on. You had Bob Coyne, you had Campfire Shadows, you had Sasquatch Chronicles, and others too. Every night of the week, you had one to look forward to. Well, they were all on Blog Talk Radio. That was the go-to back then. And each one of those shows had their own chat room. And you would just basically log into the chat room and wait for the show to start. And once the show would start, you would listen to the show and monitor what people were saying in the chat rooms and everything. It was a great time. Well, one night when I was listening to Campfire Shadows, that was Bear's show, Jim Bear Grant, or Bear King. That was his show back then. Well, there was a gentleman named Shane McMahon. He's now deceased, unfortunately, but yeah, Shane McMahon was the co-host and Jim Bear Grant was the host. Well, I'd been listening for a while when all of a sudden one night, right at the top of the show, Bear came on and said he had an announcement to make. He said he was going to be stepping down from hosting the show. Yeah, you know how Bear is. I mean, he just loves the woods, and it kind of seemed like a round peg in a square hole for him to do something like that, because he'd much rather have the freedom to head out into the woods and do whatever he wanted to do that way. Well, when he made mention of the fact that he was going to be stepping down, he said, well, if I'm going to step away, I need to find a replacement. And I think I already know a guy that would make a great replacement for me. And I'm thinking, wow, who's he thinking about? So he goes on to say that he thought Vic Cundiff would be a good replacement for him. And I laughed and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I can't do that. And then after the show, he reached out to me and offered it to me. So, oops, give me just a second. Got to take a coughing break. Sorry about that.
No worries.
He reached out to me after the show and he talked with me about it and everything that'd be involved. And I told him I'll think about it. So I did think about it. And then I got back with him and said, you know what? I think I'd like to try that. So yeah, before I knew it, I was a co-host on the show there with Shane McMahon. And I did that for 2 years. And that was 2007 and 2008. And yeah, the rest was history. While I was co-hosting that show, though, when Tim Coonbo Baker, and Bear, they went out on this outing with some other guys. And when they came back, somebody in the group, I can't remember who, but someone in the group said that they had seen a dog-faced booger. That's what they called it, a dog-faced booger. Well, I knew what a booger was. That was a Sasquatch, Southern term for a Sasquatch. But a dog-faced booger? What's that all about? So I reached out to one of those guys. I don't know if it was Coonbo or Bear after the show to try to find out, what are you talking about? And I found out they were talking about a Dogman. And yeah, I decided to put a lot of research into Dogmen and everything. And it didn't take long for me to realize, okay, well, if you have an encounter with a Sasquatch, it's so easy to find help. But if you encounter one of these Dogmen, where do you go for help? And it's got to be a lot more traumatic if you encounter one of these things than a Sasquatch. So that really makes it that much more important to be able to have a good resource to contact and try to come to terms with your experience. So I thought, yeah, there's a real need here. Well, fast forward I think it was 2013, I had put dogmanencounters.com online. Before I knew it, I had people from all over the world contacting me to tell me about the Dogman Encounters. And about a year after that, I aired the first episode of Dogman Encounters Radio and haven't looked back since.
That is absolutely awesome. And you have reached a lot of folks over the years. You really have.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot. If I had to put a number on it, I think I've probably spoken with 3,000-4,000 Dogman eyewitnesses over the years. Although a lot of people think what you see is what you get when it comes to Dogman Encounters Radio, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, most of the
there's
people
always something new. There's always something new on there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the reason for that is so many people, so many eyewitnesses contact me who you're never going to hear in the show. They don't have any interest in coming on the show, and that's totally fine. For some reason, a lot of eyewitnesses have this idea that to speak with me about their encounters and to try to get help, it's a requirement somehow to come on the show, and that's just not the case. I mean, a lot of people that contact me who've had encounters, they have no interest in coming on, and I tell them that's fine. I just do the best I can to help them come to terms with their experiences, and that's it. If they want to come on the show because they feel it's going to benefit them, then by all means, heck yes, let's do a show. But if they don't have an interest, there's no pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
good.
think that's fantastic. That is just absolutely awesome that you're available for that. I mean, that's what we try to do, but you're doing it on a much bigger scale.
Oh, yeah, well, I do it full time. Some people think this is a side hustle for me, but no, I help Dogman eyewitnesses full time. This is what I do. It's funny, I had an eyewitness not too long ago, almost acted put off when she found out from someone else that I actually earn money from Dogman Encounters Radio. But I guess what she didn't realize is I don't charge the eyewitnesses that I help a penny. I help them for free, just like I helped her for free. And she originally wanted to be a guest on the show. And yeah, if she wanted to be a guest, that's great. But if she didn't, no problem whatsoever. But she kind of hinted to me that, well, once she found out that I make money from the episodes of Dogman Encounters, then yeah, I'm not going to quote unquote let you make money off me. But my bills don't stop. Trust me on that. And with the time investment that I put into all this, I mean, yeah, it's just at the beginning, I used to work full time and do this, but it wasn't long before that was just unsustainable.
Yeah. Well, I would love to pick your brain sometime, if you didn't mind. I'd love to pick your brain about how to continue to grow our channel, because you're kind of the benchmark.
Well, sure. Be glad to help you.
Would love that. Thank you. I've got a good question for you. When you first started researching Dogman, what did you think of a possible connection between Dogman and the legends of the cynocephali that they spoke of in with the Greeks and Romans?
Well, I think it's kind of apples and oranges. There are similarities there, but when it all boils down to it, it's just apples and oranges, in my opinion. Two totally different things. The cynocephali, they're purported to have had wolf-like heads, dog-like heads, but on human-like bodies. Well, canine-type dogmen, of course, you have two types of cryptids out there that people refer to as being dogmen. Canine-type dogmen have those digitigrade-style legs like a dog or a horse or a cow would have, with hocks and stifle joints instead of ankles and knee joints. Well, cynocephali, if they have hominid style legs, which that's how they were reported as being seen, or when people saw them, they say that they did have hominid style legs. Well, if that's the case, they're definitely not a canine type dog, man. And I never heard any reports of them having claws on their fingertips, which that right there is a quality of a type 3. So I don't know what cynocephali were, but they definitely weren't a canine type dog, man. And it doesn't sound to me like they were a type 3 either. So I can't tell you what they are. I can only tell you what they're not.
Right. So what do you think about the possibility that they're at least partially subterranean? They use cave systems to travel and hide.
Oh, no, I totally believe that. I definitely believe that. These guys, they'll utilize any resources that are available to them. They're masters at that, in my opinion. So they'd be foolish not to do that. And they're very hardy. I've got no doubts about that. But there will be times in your life, if you make a living the way they do, that having access to a cave system is going to be really beneficial. So they'd be foolish not to.
Absolutely.
How about that, DA? Another very prominent person believes our theory.
I sure
We've
do.
had that theory. Yeah, we've had that theory for a while, and it seems like it's starting to kind of catch traction. So
We were talking about a while ago about how if you take a map of the missing 411 clusters and overlay it with a map of the known cave systems in the United States, they're almost identical.
Oh, no, I believe it. I do.
And they, the USGS was most recently saying that they believe the Mammoth cave systems in Kentucky and Tennessee, they now believe they connect to other cave systems that stretch as far north as Maine and as far south as southern New Mexico, connecting to Carlsbad Caverns.
Oh, no, I believe that too. Yeah, I mean, if we knew the extent of all the cave systems under the U.S., we wouldn't know what to think.
You know, there are hundreds of undocumented caves in Missouri. People are finding new ones all the time. And I would not be shocked to find out that some of the big caves in Missouri go deep enough to connect to the Mammoth cave system.
well, where'd you say? What, Bennett Springs, DA? Were they?
Yeah, there's a spring that comes out of a cave here in Missouri called Bennett Springs. It's a state park. And back in the 70s, they released a radioactive tracer marker dye into the spring to see where it would come up. And they had, everybody in the park systems all across the U.S. looking for this specific marker. And they waited and they waited and they waited. And 6 months later, it came up in Alaska.
Wow. Well, that's amazing.
Wild.
Yeah,
I mean,
wow, it doesn't do it any justice.
That's basically across the country.
Yeah, that's probably 2,000 miles or more.
So
Yeah, that's definitely all.
I think that, and I didn't see what, or I didn't see one, but I'm 100% sure that I had a Dogman encounter in LBL too. Oddly enough, though, not too far from where he had his, but probably 3
It
years
was in
before.
broad daylight.
Yeah, his was in broad daylight. Mine was at like after midnight. So,
Were you too traumatized by your encounters, or did you take it in stride?
I don't know that I really took it in stride. I was pretty shook, but I spent most of my career in law enforcement. Nothing really shakes me that bad. But it was one of those. It was a paradigm shift for sure, because I always suspected they were out there, and I'd seen lots of encounter stories and talked to people, but I'd never had an encounter of my own, and it is an absolute game changer when you actually see it. It changes everything.
It does. Yeah, it definitely does. It's just one of those things. Ever since you were just a baby, ever since you learned how to speak and comprehend language, it's been hammered into your head that the world is a certain way. You can expect this to happen possibly. You can expect that to happen possibly. But this over here, it can never happen. This exists. This doesn't. But when one day you have an encounter with one of these things and you realize, okay, well, if these things are real, which look at him over there, obviously they are, I've been living a lie. And what else is out there that I don't know about? So, I mean, it just turns your world upside down, at least for most people, because being humans, we like a certain amount of predictability to life. And if we don't have that, then it's really disconcerting. So when you have an encounter with a dog, man, that's the ultimate shock to your system when it comes to predictability. It's only understandable that it would just traumatize you so much. At least in most cases, it does.
I think had I seen what was attached to the eyes and the eye shine that I saw, would have been a different story. I know what I believe it was, but I didn't physically see. Like, I didn't see it. It's a long story, and I ain't gonna bore everybody that's already heard it 15 times. But if I'll tell you sometime if you want to. But basically, had I seen what was attached to the eyes, it probably would have been a different story. But as it stands, I didn't see. All I saw was the eye shine, but the behavior. I've had plenty of Bigfoot encounters, and it was nothing like any Bigfoot encounter that I've ever had. It was completely and totally like over in left field, different from any Bigfoot encounter that I've ever had. And I've had two encounters like that. One in LBL and one in North Georgia with Jessica Jones.
Oh, no, I believe it. Yeah, there are Sasquatch researchers out there who have some really nail-biting encounters, it seems like, with Sasquatch, and they think that getting into Dogman's going to be a nice little side venture, but they don't realize that when it comes to the intensity of most Sasquatch encounters versus a Dogman encounter, it is like apples and oranges. They have one encounter with a Dogman and it frightens them out of the woods for good. So, yeah, before somebody goes out there and starts investigating Dogmen, I really think they should do a lot of research into what they're putting themselves getting into, basically.
I've talked to lifelong hunters that after a Bigfoot sighting refuse to go back in the woods.
Oh, sure. No, I get it. I really do. There's so many people out there that maybe they don't start off as Sasquatch investigators. They just listen to these shows and think, oh man, that would be so neat to be able to head into the woods and research Dogmen. And then they head in. They have no business doing that. They don't have any business heading into the woods without a guide. I mean, they just are putting themselves at risk so much because of their ignorance. I mean, if they came across an old homestead, an abandoned homestead, they would know to watch out for unmarked wells or any of the other possible dangers out there, to watch out for snakes and what to do, what not to do. So it's not just Dogmen. They could have all sorts of other trouble, but there are just too many people jumping into this that have no business doing that. You have other people who do know the woods, but they decide they get a hair crossed and they decide to head out and I'm going to investigate Dogmen, and they just don't know anything about these guys. They go in blind. They put themselves in very bad situations. It just really is a shame.
We've done entire shows on things you should do to prepare yourself if you're going out on something like this, because it's not something you should just idly do. It's something you should have a plan in place. People need to know where you're going when you're going to be back. You need to make sure you've got a good map, because GPS will fail you. Technology will fail you when you need it the most. So you always got good physical backups. And one of the big things we tell people is to remember there's things out there that are not cryptid related that can and will kill you. I mean, they're bears, mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, snakes, and what we like to refer to as the greater North American meth head.
Yeah, good point.
Hey, Vic, Curtis Murray wanted to know if you gotten any of the Hyena-type reports lately.
Lately? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I sure have.
Do those seem to be like from one particular area, or are they scattered?
Oh, they're scattered all over the place. All the variants, I mean, they just come from all over. So there really isn't any rhyme nor reason. Just because it's, a hyena type in this area over here, that doesn't preclude the chance that you're not going to have an encounter with one that looks like the werewolf from Van Helsing. You just don't know.
So do you think, like we've theorized about, like when you look at the Sasquatch, different types of Sasquatch, things like that, it seems like the further north you go, the more aggressive and the more dangerous they get. And you have things like the Genosqua and Gugway that seem to kind of head that way. Do you think that Dogmen are more scattered and they don't really have like a certain territorial pattern, and they just are where they are?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's no pattern to it. You can find 12-footers down south, just like you can find them up in Alaska or Canada in the boreal forest. You can find the ones that look as unassuming as a timber wolf that can stand up on its back legs. You can find them anywhere. So, yeah, there really is no rhyme nor reason to it.
One I saw was standing underneath a tree with its hand against the trunk of a tree. And it looked like an upright dog. It didn't look like, a person. It didn't have a person-like chest. It had hands, but it looked like a dog standing on its hind legs. It was completely black, and the head was shaped like a wolf. But the thing that really sticks out to me most is the muzzle was different. The muzzle was shorter and like a mastiff or a Rottweiler.
Yeah, they have a lot of different looks to them. I've had credible eyewitnesses report seeing dogmen that look kind of like a lab almost. So it really runs the gamut. It does.
Have you ever heard any stories of like cat, felinoid, like cat person sightings?
I have, yeah. When I was airing episodes of my paranormal show called My Paranormal Experience, had a lady come on, and I'll look up the episode number for you. Had a lady come on and talk about a catman she saw, a 9-foot tall catman, blacker than black, crossing a highway in Florida.
Well, just a few months ago, there was a sighting here in Missouri, about an hour from where I'm at right now, where teenagers saw what they described as upright mountain lions in part of the Mark Twain National Forest here in Missouri, and apparently the Missouri Department of Conservation actually fired on them. And I've gotten confirmation of that story from a couple of different sources, and just out of the blue, just a few days ago, right before the 4th, there's a campground down there in that area too. It's in a public use area. They, without explanation, shut down that campground, and they've shut down several campgrounds down here without explanation. And one, they went so far as to bulldoze it off so you can't even get into it.
Imagine that. If they do what they can to cover up all this, they will. And by the way, that's episode 18 of My Paranormal Experience.
I will definitely check that one out.
DA, just a guy who yaps wants you to play the howl from up around my house for Vic.
Okay, Robbie lives in South Carolina. I'll give you a little explanation on this, Vic. Robbie lives in South Carolina, a little town called Pickens, and there's a part of a is it a state park or a national park?
I think the horse pasture is part of it. It's the Jim Timmerman wildlife area, so I think that's more of a state park, but it's
just outside of that state park, what they call the horse pasture. A fellow caught a what we believe is a dog man on his Ring doorbell camera, just the audio, because it was too far away. I tried to. I'm not very good with like isolating tracks or anything like that, but I was able to like just cut out the segment and get rid of a lot of the extraneous stuff that at the beginning and the end. So I've got a small segment here that you can actually hear the howl. Would you like to hear it?
Sure, lay it on me.
All righty, let me cue that rascal up. Here we go.
What do y'all think of that?
Well, that was attention getting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. We've played that a few times on the show, and a lot of times people's pets react very oddly to that sound.
Yeah, I could see why. Yeah, that just might be a dog, man. It's one of those things, though. We don't know what the extent of their abilities are when it comes to vocalizations. Just like dogs can make so many sounds. Your dog can make sounds you've never heard it make before. These guys having their intelligence being as high as it is, I mean, with different motivations, they're probably going to make different sounds. Well, being as intelligent as they are, that probably means that they have a pretty wide variety of vocalizations that they make. Again, I don't know how many they can make, but yeah, for anyone to think they can identify every vocalization that a dogman can make, they're just blowing smoke. That sounds like it just might be one, but I'd be lying if I told you I definitely knew that was a dogman.
Well, it definitely sounds canine to me. I can't with 100% certainty swear that's a dogman. It sounds like a very, very big canine.
Yeah, it does. No, I agree.
And that was captured earlier this year, just about 5-6 miles from where Robbie lives.
No, actually, I think it was last year, because I think it was August of last year when we started talking about it. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was toward the beginning of this year, but
we've been playing it so much though, it's just hard to remember. But yeah, I think it actually was last year when we first started playing it. But there's a lot. The the Facebook group that it was in, a lot of people say they hear that, and this is kind of what kind of started leading my direction for the book and where I wrote it. But a lot of people say they hear those sounds and that up around those hills and hollers all the time. You know, some people were saying it was for sure Bigfoot. Some people were saying it was something else. But what's funny about that is that's how I tried to mimic when we were down in Moon Valley. That's what I tried to mimic when we got that really aggressive
response from a Bigfoot. Actually, it was a group of them. Caught them on thermal.
Yeah, I can only imagine what they must have been thinking when you did that.
Well, we think that they probably, like any other big predators, they probably do not like each other in their hunting territories.
Oh, I'm sure that's a given there. Yeah, normally those two, they seem to mix like oil and water when it comes to Dogman and Sasquatch, but it can never be easy. It can never all be cut and dry. What I'm getting at is I've had several credible eyewitnesses report seeing Sasquatch and Dogman together, so it's really hard to know what to think. Just like it's hard to know what to think for sure about that vocalization and what made it, other than the fact that if any of these people who heard that vocalization that you spoke with, I sure hope they didn't have the bedroom windows open at night when they heard that, because if they did, I sure hope they had the rubber sheets on the bed.
Yeah, I actually talked to the guy who his dad recorded it, and I tried to get him to let me come over there. So it's actually not too far from my real dad's house. So me and my buddy Johnny actually went up there, and we stayed out there about 3.5 hours playing predator calls and, you know, just doing everything we could and you know, sitting, being quiet, didn't hear anything. But like I said, there was people in the Facebook group say we hear that all the time. So
Steve Stepanek said, I have a question. If the government sells public land, do you think we'll have more problems with cryptids?
Hey, Steve. Well, I don't think that the government's going to sell any land where there's that much of a presence of cryptids, because the last thing they want to do is to sell that land to somebody who might wind up having an encounter with one of these cryptids on that land, getting a photo that's too good, too high quality of that cryptid and coming forward with it. So yeah, exactly. If there are a lot of cryptids, if there's a strong cryptid presence on that public land, I don't think it's going to be sold to anyone in the public.
Kay Bauer says, have you heard, this was a question for you, Vic. He says, have you heard from a young man in New York that had a Dogman that tried stopping his ATV? I think his name was Cody.
No, that was Brandon Close. He actually come on the show. He was on episodes 190 and 202. No, I lost contact with him a long time ago and haven't heard from him since. And that was a Razor, a side-by-side. The dog.
We had a story about here in Missouri that I had been told was about a guy out picking morel mushrooms, and dang near got taken out and almost got knocked off his ATV when he was trying to get away.
You know what? These things, their ability is so amazing, and they really know how to push her buttons. There's so many cases like that where eyewitnesses will tell me about how he almost got me, and if I wasn't so fast, I wouldn't have gotten away with my life. These things are so fast, so intelligent, so strong. They're implements of destruction, i.e. their jaws or teeth or claws. They are so capable that you're not going to get away from one of these things unless it's a very unusual circumstance. I have no doubt that that guy who, quote unquote, almost got knocked off of his, you said it was an ATV?
Yeah.
I have no doubts that, or I should say almost no doubts, that Dogman made it seem like it was trying to grab him, trying to get him, but it let him get away. After speaking with 4,000 Dogman eyewitnesses, there are a lot of patterns that you notice. And one of those repeating patterns that happens time and time again is them doing things to make you think you got away. And they know that by you thinking that you barely got away, that's going to heighten the terror that you feel. They're not out to rip us apart and eat your eyeballs out and all this stuff as soon as the opportunity presents itself, unless you're talking about a deviant one. people think because of how I talk about these guys and their tendency to try and traumatize you to within an inch of your life, but not harm you, they think that means that Vic is of the mindset that all of them are safe to be around. And I'll never say that. I mean, yeah, you're going to have deviant examples of any critter out there. Name one type of critter that doesn't have deviant examples. There are dangerous dogs, dangerous horses, pigs, goats, cows, you name it, that if you go around them, they will kill you if they get the opportunity. They're deviant people. You both work in law enforcement. So, there are even deviant people who are dangerous. And if you go around them and if they have the opportunity, they will kill you. So why should dogmen be any different? But here's a really important thing when it comes to dogmen that most people miss, who have this fascination with them. And that is, when you consider the fact I've spoken with 4,000 dogman eyewitnesses, so many of those people were caught dead nuts to rights by the dogmen they encountered, but they were allowed to leave their encounters without a scratch. If that's the case, that right there proves these guys cannot be wired as a whole to rip you apart as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Because if that's the case, if that's how they were, then I would not have spoken with thousands of them who were caught, dead nuts to rights by the dogmen they encountered, but allowed to leave the encounter without a single hair in their heads being harmed. Fire ants, I use this example all the time. If you find a fire ant mound and put your hand on that fire ant mound, how many times out of 10 are they going to tear you up? Well, it's obvious. 10 out of 10. That's because they're wired to be dangerous. They're wired to harm you as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Well, that's an expected pattern from something like that, like fire ants that are wired to be so dangerous and aggressive. Well, dogmen, same thing holds true with them. If they were wired to be so dangerous, you wouldn't have thousands of examples of people who are right there for the taking, but allowed to leave the encounter without any harm coming to them. Out of the 4,000 eyewitnesses I've spoken with over the years about their dogman encounters, since I spoke with my first one back in 2007, he had a pretty harrowing encounter. He lived right next to the LBL. He had a pretty frightening encounter himself. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. Out of 4,000 dogman eyewitnesses I've spoken with over the years, the number of credible eyewitnesses who've ever told me about being intentionally harmed by the dogman they encountered is a whopping 7, 8, maybe 9. 7, 8, maybe 9 dogman attacks. Now, at first, that's going to make you reel and say, wow, 7 or 8, maybe 9 dogman attacks? Yeah, that's not going to give you the warm and fuzzies when you think about it. And it shouldn't. But when you look at the big picture, if we're talking about 7, 8, maybe 9 attacks out of 4,000 people in the case study, that right there tells you something profound. And what it tells you is, if you polled 4,000 people who have had direct interactions with horses and asked them that question, okay, how many of you have ever been intentionally harmed by a horse you've interacted with? I'm talking about kicked, bitten, stomped, run into, you name it. The number of yeses would be in the hundreds. If you swapped out horses for cattle, for goats, for pigs, for dogs, for house cats, whatever the critter, that number would still be in the hundreds if we're talking about a sample size in the thousands. Well, what that tells us is, as hard to believe as it might be, if you have an encounter with a dogman, you're much less likely to be harmed than if you interact with any of these animals that we take for granted as being in existence, that we interact with every day. I know that's really hard to wrap your mind around, but the numbers don't lie.
True, but one thing that doesn't factor into that is successful attacks would leave no witnesses.
That's right, but back to the whole fire ant mound example. Yeah, if they were wired to be dangerous and like that and rip us apart, then you wouldn't have 7, 8, maybe 9 attacks out of 3,000. That wouldn't be the case. You'd have 7, 8, 9 attacks out of 7, 8, 9 possibilities for a dogman attack. Or let's be a little more lenient. We would have, if I spoke with 4,000 dogman eyewitnesses, you would have at least attacks in the thousands, 1,500, 2,000, 2,700 attacks. I mean, these things, like I said, are so capable. You're not going to outrun one. You're not going to outwit one in the woods. I mean, they have every advantage when it comes to being in the woods over us. I don't care what kind of a woodsman you think you are. I don't care if you can light a campfire with a blue angel. I mean, you aren't enough of a woodsman to outsmart, to outmaneuver one of these things that has it in its mind to take you out. So, the numbers, that right there tells me that these guys clearly are not wired to rip us apart as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Now, I'm never going to say that a dogman doesn't wake up and it's having a bad morning. It slept on the wrong side. It woke up on the wrong side of the log. Whatever reason, it's in a bad mood. So now it is dangerous to be around, and it does attack somebody that it comes into contact with, and that's why that person can't come forward to talk about the attack. So, yeah, I'm never going to say that dogmen never attack people, because I just can't believe that they don't. I'm sure they do attack people, but that's clearly the exception rather than the expected rule.
I think it depends on the circumstances. I believe they're that they're opportunistic, but they also, much like any other predator, they have to do kind of a cost analysis on the attack. I'm like, out in the wild, if a predator gets hurt, it's usually a death sentence in the wild, because they can't just pop over to the vet and get patched up. If a big predator goes after big prey and they end up getting badly injured, they're probably going to die. So I think part of why not every encounter is violent is because they judge whether or not, hey, do I think this guy's armed? Hey, or whether or not they're hungry, or if the opportunity presents itself well. But I think there's a lot of factors that go on in whether or not what their behavior becomes, and I think a big chunk of that is on how we react to them.
I don't agree with that. Not to be a contrarian, but when you think about it, mountain lions, they have that nickname, deer killing machine, for a reason. They're so good at it. Well, these guys, they make mountain lions look like rank amateurs. They do not have any trouble feeding themselves. No trouble whatsoever. I mean, just one deer, who knows how long that's going to feed them. And deer, they're so populous now, there are even more of them than there used to be, because fewer people hunt every year. They don't have any trouble feeding themselves. And when you consider the fact that they know, being as intelligent as they are, they know what comes along with taking one of us out. They know those hairless things are going to flood the area. All these problems are going to pop up. There's going to be so much blowback from doing that. Why would they kill someone for a food source when, okay, I can kill this deer over here that's got to taste a heck of a lot better than us? I mean, look at Robbie there. Do you think he would taste good? I mean,
I'm heavily marbled.
he's Wagyu human right there. Whew, that's USDA choice.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, there's no way we could taste nearly as good as venison. So just go for the better tasting opportunity over here with the deer. That's not going to have all this blowback. So yeah, I mean, people, they worry about the dogman attacks, but unless they're having a bad day or there's something else going on that would make this dogman dangerous, then I just don't think they make a habit out of doing that, because there's really no benefit to them. There's no need, there's no benefit. And even an injured dogman, there's a good chance it could still climb a tree and drop down on a deer that comes underneath it. And they're so wily, they're so intelligent. I just don't see, even except for the most extreme cases, a dogman having trouble feeding itself, even if it does get injured, unless it's a really bad injury.
Getting hit by a car or something like that.
Well, I've spoken with tons of people over the years who've hit dogmen. The dogman got up and maybe shook and then walked off or ran off. So even that doesn't seem to really have that much of an effect on them.
There are a lot of people that believe that dogmen were a government experiment that got away. What do you think about that?
Well, at face value, that sounds like a really good explanation, but when you look into it, that can't be the whole story. I mean, the first documented Dogman encounter happened in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan. You're going to tell me that the government, any government, had anything approaching the technology to make a test tube Dogman in a laboratory back then? No way. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible that we're making them now. So you might have these dogmen over here that are naturally occurring. You've got these dogmen over here that the government made in a lab. So you might have two different types. I really don't know. You might have dogmen too, because there's so many credible eyewitnesses who report seeing these guys do things that would defy any explanation of them being just flesh and blood with no special abilities. And then also you've got so many impressive, credible eyewitnesses who report seeing them do things that point towards them just being flesh and blood animals that are out there trying to scratch out a living every day, day in, day out. So maybe you have three different types of dogmen with three different origins. I really don't know.
We've often said that our government has a history of trying to train animals for combat. In World War II, they trained dolphins to try to detect enemy divers. They tried to teach killer whales to plant mines on ships' hulls. They've used dogs for forever, training them for combat. They've used horses. So it's not above our government to try to weaponize something. As I think the cases where people have seen Dogman either with controllers or, working with military, I think it's probably a case where they've probably already taken an existing one and modified it.
You know what? I can't go into all the reasons why I don't think that they are acting as operatives for the government in that capacity as weapons, biological weapons. But what I can go into with you is when you consider how intelligent these things are, how physically capable they are, I just can't buy that we could make them do anything that they wouldn't want to do, that they wouldn't see as being in their best interest. I just can't see how you could ever convince a dogman it's in its best interest to go over here and attack this person because this is our enemy. I can't buy that. And anymore, there are so many stories being put out there that are clearly just creepypasta. People are making up and putting out there, presenting these stories as being true, being genuine, when in fact, they're just trying to line their pockets because they realize that views, the fright sells. The more frightening these stories they make up are, the more people are going to watch their shows and listen to their podcast episodes. And that just means more money to them. And to them, money trumps ethics when it comes to their decision-making process. It's an unfortunate truth in this, but yeah, it seems like I'm seeing that more and more all the time. Just like the kid who, I'm sorry.
The government, Kate Bauer said there was another show that claimed the government used them dogmen in Vietnam tunnels.
Yeah, I can't reveal sources, but all I'm going to say is, no. Yeah, that didn't happen.
Often wondered. I would think as intelligent as these things are, and as like you're saying, as intelligent and as cunning and as powerful as they are, controlling one would be a very dangerous gamble.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's so many holes in that idea that they were used as tunnel rats. I mean, I could shoot that. I could make Swiss cheese out of that because of all the holes. Think about it this way. What kind of soldier did they always choose to be a tunnel rat in Vietnam?
The tunnel rats are always the little guys.
The little guy. I've got some wide shoulders. Very few guys have shoulders as wide as I have. But a dogman, even a moderately sized dogman, is going to have shoulders more than twice as wide as I have. I mean, I'm not going to be able to go into those tunnels. So how are you going to tell me you could get a dogman to go into those tunnels? They're just not cut out for it. I mean, that's just one of the many holes in that whole story. Just like the story about the guy who, quote unquote, was there when the LBL murder took place with the RV. That never happened. That didn't happen.
As a cop, there were so many holes in that story. They were just absolutely full of holes. And some of them were blatant violations of law enforcement protocol. Number one, they never, ever take a witness back to the scene. They just don't. Number two, it is constitutionally illegal for you to question a minor without a guardian there. You can't do it. It can't. You are not allowed by the Constitution to interrogate a minor until their parent or guardian is present, and then that just it just goes on from there. Number one, you can't target practice at a campground, and he said that was going. Sorry, I don't mean to get on a tear there, but there was just so many holes in that story. I couldn't buy it.
No, I understand.
I think one thing that people don't realize or they don't think about is everybody, when they see something, and I see this, the DA see it in law enforcement, I see it in law enforcement, nobody describes the same thing the same way. Two people could be standing right shoulder to shoulder and watch a crime happen, and you're going to get two completely different eyewitness accounts of what happened because everybody perceives things differently. So what one person perceives as an aggressive encounter or an attack, somebody else might perceive as it just ran by me. So you got to take in the human mind, how the human mind works before you can really take credit or give credit one way or the other to how somebody has, described something. And really a description that you're getting from a witness, it's just like me. If I go to a call, I wasn't there, I didn't see it. So I'm just having to base my opinion of what I think they said on what they said. And I think a lot of people just don't take into consideration that sometimes people just perceive things differently. That doesn't mean that this person's wrong or this person's wrong. It just means their perception of it was different than what the other person's perception was. And I think that's where you get a lot of these differing opinions of people saying, well, I think they're dangerous. Well, no, I don't think they're just like Bigfoot. If you think about it, you hear so many stories of, oh, it was such a surreal, nice and peaceful thing. And then you hear other people's stories. Oh my God, how did we get out of that? Does that mean, like you said earlier, does that mean every single one of them is wired to be dangerous? No. It could just mean that they were running across different breeds, or it could just be that somebody had that fight or flight response when they saw one walk by, and to them they perceived it, this 10-foot tall Sasquatch walking by was trying to attack them, when it was just in reality it was just walking across the path to go get him some berries on the other side of the trail. So I think you got to take human misconception and human nature into a lot of that factor too.
Yeah, raise a lot of good points there.
Kay Bowers says, Vic, what's the one encounter that absolutely terrifies you?
Well, Kay, none of them have terrified me. I mean, you have to remember how many encounters I've had shared with me over the years. I mean, people wonder if I have nightmares about dogmen. No, I don't have nightmares about dogmen. But I'll listen to an encounter. I'll have an eyewitness on the phone, and I'll have them explain detail by detail what happened. And as they're breaking down what happened, I'll think, yeah, well, that's scary. That's horrible that happened. I can only imagine what this must have done to them. But as far as terrifying me, no, haven't had any encounters that have terrified me. But remember, you're talking to a guy who goes for walks in the big woods here for miles and miles. I've walked hundreds of miles in the big woods here without a weapon, without anyone else with me. And we're talking in this woods, it's like a Holiday Inn for these guys. You could have an army of dogmen in this woods. You could have an army of Sasquatch in the woods and never see them. And actually, I'll do you one better. Years ago, my brother was with me, and he actually found a Sasquatch print in the woods. I mean, it's just perfect. It's got moving water, all the resources with game, all the cover. It's big. I mean, it's got everything they could want, but I still go for walks out there. So if I was terrified by any of this, you better believe I wouldn't do that. But I understand what their MO is. I mean, it's been hammered into my head time after time that their MO is not normally to rip you apart as soon as the opportunity presents itself. It's clear that their MO is, if they have an encounter, if they force an encounter to happen, In almost every case, it's to frighten you to within an inch of your life. And once they can see that's happened, well, move on. I got what I wanted. So I just keep that in mind. And that's why I love to go out and walk in the woods. And I hear what people say. I know what people, I'm not going to say I've heard what people say about me, but I know what people that know about me doing that. I know what they say about me doing that. They think it's crazy. It's foolish. It's just the craziest thing that I could do. But I've walked hundreds of miles in that woods. I'm still here. And like I said, I wouldn't do that if it wasn't from what I know.
Someone was asking, what was the bloodiest encounter you've had? You know, Cajun Dog said, what's the bloodiest encounter you've ever had shared with you?
Wow. Well, I've had people talk about their attacks, but they never really mentioned blood or anything like that. So I'm not sure which one was the bloodiest. And I can't even really remember which one was the most vicious, but the eyewitness still survived, so it couldn't have been that bad. But again, back to the whole thing, I'm never going to say that they never attack people, because I'm sure they definitely do. So yeah, I really can't answer that question for you.
My hat's off to you if you go out unarmed. After 20 years in law enforcement, I'm more worried about the human animal than I am anything else. I don't after 10 years of my career was in corrections. I don't check my mail. I don't go out to the mailbox without something on. It's just too dangerous of a place. I mean, the town I live in, over the last 20 years, I couldn't even tell you how many people I've put in handcuffs. And even to this day, even though I'm retired now, my wife and I will still walk into a restaurant and I'll look back in the kitchen and go, nope, not eating here. And, or I can't even go to Walmart without seeing 4 or 5 guys I put in handcuffs. I tell my wife all the time, I said, we need to get the heck out of here.
Oh, no, I understand. Yeah, there are other two-legged predators out there you have to worry about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There are.
So is there one part of the United States where there seems to be more encounters, or does it seem to be kind of equally distributed?
Yeah, right now the hot spot, and it's been this way for years. The hot spot is right around the Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania area. Yeah, right around there. West Virginia, not so much so. But yeah, fair amount of encounters happen there that have been reported to me also, but not like Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, or Pennsylvania. Don't know what it is about those states, but yeah, like I said, for years, those have been the hot spots, those states. People still think for some reason that Michigan and Wisconsin, those are the hot spots, because that's obviously where all this got its start. And this whole Dogman phenomenon it gained its notoriety, but it's been years since those places had that many encounters coming in. It's been a while since I've had an encounter. Well, I take that back. I've had some Michigans come in fairly recently, but I can't even tell you how long it's been since one came in from Wisconsin. So they're definitely not hot spots now.
Well, speaking of Tennessee, what's your take on Werewolf Springs story and the sightings that continued up there?
Oh, I think there's some there. I do. I think there's meat to that story. How much meat there is on the bone, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I definitely think there's something to it.
See, what do you think about the story? That you think that's a credible story that started at the
one back in the 1800s?
Yeah. The train derailment.
The train derailment. I was thinking of a more recent experience. What happened with the whole train derailment?
After the initial incident where the man and his servant ran from the coach, and the man said he could hear the servant being torn apart, the locals tried to dismiss it as saying that there had been a train derailment and a circus train derailed and the wild man of Borneo had escaped. And of course, I've heard that on several stories where people are like, oh, they said it was the wild man of Borneo. It's not the wild man of Borneo. That's just the only excuse they could come up with.
Yeah.
So you don't think the wild man of Borneo did that then? Is that what you're trying to say there, DA?
believe that there probably is a wild man of Borneo, but I don't think there was 47 trains that derailed, releasing them into the American wilderness.
Because every train derailment back in that day, you heard wild man of Borneo escaped. I don't think Borneo had that many wild men that they were shipping over here to the United
Shipping them
States.
over here by dozens.
I sure hope they didn't. That wouldn't be a good scene, would it?
Definitely not.
It's just one
the
of those
story that
things.
DA started on, about the guy and his servant that get attacked, and then the servant gets killed, so they bring in the hunter, and he goes to the cabin and spends the night in the cabin. And the thing gets in the cabin and going for him all night, and then he had 2 bullets left. DA was getting ready to end it.
Yeah,
And-
and himself.
And dawn happened, and it left at dawn and left him alone. So,
And then the dude
and I
was
know
done.
that's,
Get out of here.
that's the story, but
Yeah, I've got my doubts about that. It's got a certain
It's
smell
interesting
to
story.
it. It might be true. There are fascinating things that are hard to believe that actually are true, but I think I would put that story into that category.
I've got one for you. This was kind of an interesting one. I'd really like to get your perspective on this. When I first started digging into like creature encounters, Bigfoot, mostly it was Bigfoot back when I was younger, and it's only been Dogman probably in the last 10 years or so. But when I was like, from the time I first started, asking neighbors and stuff like that if they'd heard anything or seen anything like that, I almost never heard of anything that was in town. And once in a while I'd say, hey, we had something. I'm pretty sure it was a Bigfoot was going through our trash can. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I've heard several stories of Dogman sightings in town. Have you noticed that trend, or what do you think of the possibility of them being in an urban environment?
Well, I haven't really noticed any trend with that. I've heard several instances of that happening, though. I mean, I definitely do believe they head into major metropolitan areas, even not just a country town, but how does Dallas, Boston, Cincinnati, Chicago, Columbus,
LA.
Ohio, LA. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of major metropolitan areas that credible eyewitnesses have come forward to talk about seeing dogmen well within the city limits. So I most definitely do believe they do that. In fact, years ago, there was a police officer who contacted me to let me know about one day he had the day off. It was a weekday, and he lived on a cul-de-sac. He wasn't right at the end of the cul-de-sac, but he was close to it. And he was just sitting there at the dining room table there with the newspaper, sipping on some coffee, when all of a sudden, and he was facing the front wall of his house. Well, all of a sudden, he saw some motion over the top of the paper out on the street. Well, he knew that everybody on that small cul-de-sac should be either at school or at work. So he looked up, and what did he see? This was right in the middle of the afternoon. He sees what looked to him like a werewolf moving from one, I think, left to right in full view of him through that window out on the street. So I don't know if he spit out his coffee or what, but he got up, and after he got himself together, he walked to the front door and opened it and went out on the front step. And as he looked for it, he looked just in time to see it disappearing into a cornfield between the two houses that were at the very dead end of the closed end of the cul-de-sac. You know how those backyards are going to have like a pie shape to them. Well, he was able to look back through the gap and see it disappear into the grown-up cornfield. So it was actually coming from the deep part of the neighborhood. So it had been into the neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon. So that right there is a testament. They go where they want to go, and they do what they want to do.
That's something I've noticed. Maybe not a trend, but I've noticed an awful lot is cornfields a lot with dogmen.
Cornfields attract deer.
Maybe that's the connection, but it
Cornfields
seems like there's
attract
a lot of
deer.
stories that I've heard that involve cornfields.
I grew up on a farm. If you've got a big garden or a cornfield, you're gonna find deer. Vic, have you heard the story about the siege of Lockett Ranch at Taylor, Mississippi?
Yeah, I sure have. Remember what I was talking about earlier about made up stories? Yeah, that never happened. It never did. When you have someone contact you who grew up there, grew up just right outside of town. You know how these small towns are. Everyone knows everyone else. Everyone knows everything about everyone else. There are no secrets. Well, if something as profound as that happened, if anything that was close to as profound as that would have happened, you know, everyone in the area would have known about that. Well, when this person who contacted me, when they told me how they never heard anything about that actually happening. None of their family members ever heard anything about that, ever heard a whisper about that happening. None of their friends heard anything about that ever happening. That right there tells me everything I need to know about the veracity of the claim that that was a genuine story. It never happened. It was just an attempt to make money, just to get more views, because it was a fictitious story that was made up to be as over the top as possible, presented it as being factual, a factual story. So that put butts in seats. That's all that was going on there, unfortunately.
So, but it's a really interesting story. I mean, I couldn't testify to whether or not it was true or not, but it's a very interesting story to say the least. And I agree. If something like that happened, I grew up in a small town, and if anything like that had happened, they'd be talking around a small town where I grew up. They'd be talking about that for generations.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's inescapable. Yeah, if anything half as traumatic and extravagant as that happened, you know darn well that'd be the case. I don't know if this person got a belly full of it, the idea that that was put out there as being a genuine story, and they thought, yeah, I want to shoot this down or what. But yeah, I mean, they contacted me to let me know about that all those things I told you about, asking family members and friends, people all over that area, and nobody had heard about that.
That's kind of interesting. Well, I'm glad you let us know about that. That's definitely something to be considering. Richie Evans says, DA asked Vic about the kid that was attacked by a dog man about 6 years ago in Kentucky, 10 or 12 years old boy on the news. I think he's talking about the one where the kid was dragged up a mountainside.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely what he's talking about. No, I think that was a genuine story. I think, unfortunately, it did happen. Like I said, sometimes you'll have extenuating circumstances where these guys, they'll do that sort of thing. Don't know why that dog man did that. I do believe that it was a dog man that did that. Don't know why it would have done that, but yeah, I believe that actually did happen, unfortunately.
Because that's not normal for a dog to drag anything that big that far, especially up a hill. But I can see something with hands do it. But dogs, they've got to drag it with their mouth. To me, that sounded, as soon as I heard that story, I'm like, that doesn't sound like dogs, because that's what they tried to say, was that it was a wild dog attack. But even when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. There's more going on with this one. There was another one too, and it was somewhere in Tennessee, and I'm trying to remember where it was, where a woman and a man on separate incidents were attacked and killed inside the city limits, and they tried to say that was a dog as well. That one I was like, I don't know about that. That sounds awfully. Well, the woman, it was missing like 42% of her tissue or something like that. That's
Wow.
not typical for a dog.
No, it's not. Not at all. Well, I mean, the government's going to do anything they can to cover up things like that. They really will. So that doesn't surprise me. That was a story they put out.
Okay, in that case where there are two adults, a male and a female, attacked, I've got the copy of the autopsy reports somewhere, and I've looked at a lot of autopsy reports in my career. Those were some of the most incomplete autopsy reports I've ever seen. They were missing pages and pages of details that should have been in an autopsy, but were not.
Oh, no, I believe it.
Robert D said, if you wanted to know if you'd heard about the Amazon driver that was killed here in Missouri 3 years ago, I think it was in 2022.
Yeah.
And they claimed that was a dog attack, but they had to go in the house to kill the dogs that they claim attacked them. attacked the Amazon driver, and he was found dead and partially eaten outside the fence. They never released the necropsy on the dogs to say whether or not the dogs had human protein in their stomachs. There was no blood on the dogs, but this Amazon driver there was a rural route out in the country. He was attacked and killed just outside the fence. And like I said, when the law enforcement responded, they had to kick the door in to go in the house, and then shot the dogs in the house and then blamed it on the dogs. I didn't buy that one from the start either, because one, the dogs were inside the fence, inside a locked house, and two, the person who was killed was, like I said, outside the fence. And that is, if that had been conclusive that had been the dogs, the case would be closed. But one thing we've determined in a lot of cases, Robbie and I have discovered this when we start trying to do Freedom of Information Acts on Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests. If the case is still considered active, they will not release anything on the case. So I think that's a way of them getting around ever releasing what actually happened, by leaving it listed as an open case, even though they claim they know what did it. By leaving the case open, it's not subject to Freedom of Information Act.
Oh no, I believe it. It really is a shame that all these people died and it's being swept under the rug. It really is.
It's unfortunate. One of the things we talked about, are you familiar with the Bowman incident that Teddy Roosevelt wrote about in The Wilderness Hunter? I
am.
I've talked about this quite a bit, and we've been talking about this for about 3 years now, Robbie.
Yeah, about 3.
From the level of detail that's in the Bowman incident, the fact that Bowman was never given a first name, and he never came forward after the President of the United States released a book, that mentioned him, and even though every other story is about Teddy, the one incident, the Bowman incident, is supposedly about this guy Bowman. I think Teddy Roosevelt was actually Bowman. I really do, because Teddy Roosevelt was on the sculling team when he went to, I believe it was Yale. He was on the sculling team, the little narrow wooden canoes that they race on the lake, the rivers up there. He was on the sculling team, and he was the front man in the team. And the front man on the sculling team is called a bowman. And Teddy Roosevelt's nickname in college was Bowman.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, there just
I think
might be
it really was about Teddy.
Yeah, you just might be right about that. That's interesting.
Well, he still had political aspirations. That book was released in 1888, I think, or 1889, and he didn't become president for several years after that. So he had political aspirations at the time, and the last thing he wanted to do was have people think he was crazy, because he claimed he saw a monster out in the woods. So he wrote it as a dramatized account. And I can tell you from taking eyewitness statements and stories, and as you can tell too, Vic, because you've interviewed thousands of people. How often do you get that much detail that you get in the Bowman incident? I mean, he described how the traps were laid. He described how they made their camp. He described details that would be glossed over by just your average person repeating what happened to them, because they would concentrate on the pertinent facts and not talk about all the little life details that were in that. And that, to me, that just made it seemed far more likely that Teddy was telling it from memory and not telling it just based on something he heard over a campfire.
You raised some really good points there. Yeah, I think you might be onto something. Yeah, I can't remember ever a time when someone shared that many details about their experience. I've had some people contact me who are just masterful at laying out their encounters. I mean, the details were just amazing, but probably not to that extent. But yeah, you just might be right. You make a really good case for it actually being him.
Well, and also when you flash forward to when Teddy became president, one of the first things he did was help create the national park system, which set aside 88.5 million acres for habitat.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sure does make you wonder why they did that.
And no president since has messed with it.
Yeah, you make some really good points about that.
I truly personally believe that Teddy Roosevelt was Bowman, and because of his knowledge of cryptids is why certain certain things are the way they are when it comes to dealing with government land, because we started digging into that, and once we discovered how many acres there were of national park land, which was like 88.5 million acres, then when you add in public access areas, public use areas, wildlife management areas, state parks, not just national parks, state parks, national battlefields, and also looking at reservations and Bureau of Land Management land, that all adds up to be well over 1 billion acres.
Yeah, that's a lot of land, and it's so hard to believe that.
Don't develop.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So I still firmly believe that I will probably go to my grave believing Teddy was Bowman.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, you make a really good case for that.
And there's quite a few other channels that have started picking up and running that story too. Lore Lodge, I don't know if you've ever heard of them. I just flipping around in the garage one day and found that channel, and like we started doing this, we were talking about this theory 3 years ago. This was like a couple of months ago that they had just put a video out about it, and I was like, what? This sounds familiar. So it's starting to become a popular theory, and I'm not trying to say that we popularized it, but there's a lot of people starting to think along the same lines.
Nightly 45 says, do you think the government will ever release the truth about cryptids?
Definitely not. I don't. I think they have a good reason. I hate the fact that reason exists, but I can definitely understand why they'll do anything to keep their existence under wraps. If they ever let it out of the bag that Sasquatch was a reality, was extant, that would cause all sorts of blowback that we wouldn't even want to come close to dealing with. But if they came out and they acknowledged the fact that dogmen were real, wow. Remember that scene from Jaws where the mayor told Chief Brody, look, if you go out there, because I knew it was holiday weekend, remember how the mayor told Chief Brody, look, if you go down to the beach and yell Barracuda, people say, what? What?
Huh? What?
But if you yell shark, you're going to have a full panic on your hands. Same thing with Sasquatch compared to dogmen. Yeah, Sasquatch would really get people's attention, but yeah, if they allowed it to be let out of the bag that dogmen really are out there, hey, guess what? In the woods near you, there's every possibility that there are creatures that look like giant werewolves. Yeah, I mean, that would not go over well. Look at how we dealt with COVID and other things like that. The general public would lose its mind. Think about how many things that we rely upon on a day-to-day basis that are harvested in the forest. I mean, from the lumber that we have in our homes and our buildings, the paper we use, the medications that come from plants that are harvested in the forest. I mean, our way of life would just come crashing down. Our economy would falter almost instantly. So it makes sense. It really makes sense. If you're a lumberjack, you're not going to want to run a noisy chainsaw 10 hours out of the day where you can't see or hear anything that's going on behind you. One of these things might be out in the woods with you. Who's going to want to live anywhere near a forest also? I mean, the fallout would be tremendous. So the government, they're smart. They know that the fallout would be just unbearable. So they're going to do whatever they can to keep the existence of these things under wraps.
I agree. I fully agree. They're never going to tell us the whole truth. They might tell us little bits and pieces, or might reveal little clues, but I don't think they're ever just going to out and out just say, here it is. I think that's kind of wishful thinking at best. What do you think about the Port Chatham story, about Port Chatham, Alaska?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something that was going on there. I think it just might have been some type of an issue with the Sasquatch. Might have been a deviant Sasquatch that was killing all those people. I definitely believe that. I think it probably was Sasquatch related. When you look into the things behind it, I think it probably was Sasquatch.
And when they start talking about the hairy man and the Nantinaq, as some of the tribes call it, they seem to be a heck of a lot more aggressive than the ones we have in the lower 48 down here. And I kind of liken that to bears. I mean, if you look at black bears, which are the most common down here in the lower 48, there are 24 subspecies of black bear. There's 24 different varieties of black bear. And they generally primarily eat roots and berries, and they're omnivores. They'll eat just about anything. They'll eat roadkill. They'll even hunt from time to time. But for the most part, if it's an easy meal, they're just going to grab it. They're going to grab berries and roots and trash and other dead animals and things like that. You go a little farther north, up in the states where it's a little colder, like Minnesota, the Great Lakes states or the Rocky Mountains, and you start running into grizzlies where the climate is more rugged and more cold. Yes, grizzlies still eat roots and berries, but they rely a lot more on meat than the smaller black bear. They're warmer weather cousins. Then you get up north even farther and run into the polar bear, and the polar bear's a confirmed man eater. It doesn't eat roots and berries. It eats seals, fish, caribou, and slow Eskimos.
Oh, no, I believe it.
And I think it's much like with us. I mean, if we live in a colder climate, it takes our body burns more calories just trying to stay warm. So I think, it's much like the same thing with any other animal, especially a mammal, that when they're in a colder climate like that, they've got to take in a larger amount of calories just to exist. And most of that calories is going to have to come from meat protein.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, you get so much more in the way of calories from meat than you do from vegetation.
Yeah.
I think that's why, like colder climates, that's why they're more aggressive, because they have to rely on meat more, and they're certainly not going to brook any interference in them getting it.
Oh, no argument from me on that at all.
Little Patty wouldn't know what you thought. What was your take on the Beast of Bray Road?
No, I think there's something to that. I do. The Beast of Bray Road, I think what you're looking at is several dogmen that made their presence known back then, and people just thought, okay, well, we don't even know about these things, so whenever this is seen, it must be one specimen. But no, I think you had dogmen that were just making their presence known back then, and that's how all this got started for the most part. It was brought into not really the limelight, but it made a lot of people aware of the dogman phenomenon.
Roxanne wants to know if you'd heard any encounters where it was children who'd seen Dogman, and when they got older, said that they didn't feel in danger.
I can't really think of any people I've spoken with who encountered these things as kids who grew up and went on to tell me about how they didn't feel in danger when they encountered these things. That's a recurring theme. Almost all eyewitnesses, they feel this sense of extreme panic, extreme danger when they're around these things. Now, there have been people who they lived in certain areas where they had quote unquote resident dogmen living around that they had some kind of relationship with. It wasn't necessarily an amicable relationship. It wasn't a relationship, I should say, where they saying kumbaya or anything like that, but okay, the dogman's over there and I'm over here, and he hasn't given me any reason to fear him. He hasn't tried to frighten me. So yeah, I've had people contact me with arrangements like that they told me about, but never a situation where they encountered dogmen as kids, but they didn't have that fear going. They grew up and they went on to tell me about that.
All right, I had another question in my head, but I completely spaced out and lost it. God dang it, I hate it when I do that. I really ought to write down these questions so I don't forget them. I'm bad about that. But which do you think is inherently more dangerous? Do you think Dogman or Bigfoot are more dangerous? Or do you think it's just situational?
I think it's just situational. I really do. Neither one would have that much in the way of cause to ever harm us unless it's really extenuating circumstances. But yeah, I think it's kind of a wash on that. I do. I think dogmen are probably more prone to aggression in most cases, but Sasquatch, I think they probably can be fairly prone to that too if you push the wrong button. So I don't know. Good question.
Are you familiar with the legend of the Ozarks Howler?
I've heard about it. Yeah, I've heard about that. I think that's a Sasquatch, though.
The descriptions, they describe it as about the size of a bear, but either being cat-like or dog-like and having horns on its head. And supposedly Daniel Boone killed one near Cuba, Missouri. But Teddy Roosevelt was part of an order that was like a fraternal order, a secret society that was put in place to protect. The order is still around. You can research them. One of the native names for the Ozarks howler was the hoo hoo. The hoo hoo. I know, weird name, but they called it the hoo hoo. And the order is called the Concatenated Order of the Hoo Hoo. Teddy Roosevelt was president of the order at one time, and so was Woodrow Wilson. Teddy Roosevelt first heard about the Ozark howler from one of the Rough Riders going up San Juan Hill. It was a guy from Arkansas, and Teddy came back to Arkansas with him, and allegedly that's why the Ozark National Forest was originally set aside, was as a game preserve just for the Ozarks howler.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know nearly that much about it. And from the way you described it, sure sounds like it probably was a dog man. A lot of people, they see their ears, and when they lay their ears back, as long as their ears are, it's really easy to mistake them for being horns. So maybe that was a dog man that started all that.
Although they're always described as being on all fours, I've never heard a story of the Ozarks howler being upright. I've always heard stories of them moving on all fours.
Well, dogmen spend a lot of time on all fours too, so yeah, maybe there's something to that.
I've heard quite a few encounter stories from people that have described their sighting of a dogman as it approaching on all fours. And just before it got up, several of them have described hearing what they described as a popping sound, much like popping your knuckles, and then it stands up and its hands are opening up.
Oh, sure, yeah, I've heard that quite a few times myself. In fact, I had a surgeon contact me one night after an episode, and he was just basically breaking down how that would actually make sense. Not always, but how it could make sense to hear that. The popping sounds as it transformed, or I guess it transitioned, I should say, from being down on all fours to standing bipedally. So, yeah, that's a pretty commonly reported feature.
I think that their natural form is probably all fours. They probably spend the bulk of their time on all fours, but they have to actually physically make their hands extend because now even Kuhnbo has described Dogman's hands as being spindly, like a raccoon's hands. And raccoon's hands, while they do have like an opposable thumb, it almost looks like they've got an extra digit in there. Like an extra joint in their fingers. It does look very spindly. But if they spend most of the time with those curled up like paws, and if that's their natural status, killing a dog man, it would probably just look like a very, very large wolf if somebody didn't know what to look for.
Well, when it comes to canine type dogmen, when they ambulate on all fours, instead of knuckle walking, they have their hands open because of their claws. They have their palms are on the ground instead of it being their knuckles and all. But then again, when you're talking about something that's got claws, as long as theirs, it just makes sense they would do that.
Yeah. I just think it's very interesting that so many people have talked about hearing that popping sound as they stood up.
Oh, definitely.
Someone says, they've heard that dogmen follow water and railroad tracks. Is that true?
Well, railroad tracks are definitely a lot easier to follow through the forest than just breaking your way through the forest. But these things are so powerful that I don't know there's that much benefit to them just walking train tracks. They can definitely see further that way, you would think. See game, see deer up ahead, but I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. I don't really know. There's been
a lot of sightings that I've taken from people that saw them in power line right of ways where they've cut strips through the forest for power lines.
Yeah, I believe it. I do. I think that's more of a case where people, the eyewitnesses, have a better ability to see the dogman because the train tracks are open and you can see a long way compared to the dogman making a habit out of using the train tracks to travel.
Just like something hit the trees wearing a natural ghillie suit, it's going to be very difficult to see it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Just like in order to hear a tree fall in the woods, someone has to be there.
Jeff Yarrington said, Vic, tell them about the dogman crawling through a doggy door.
Well, that was a story I alluded to back at the start of the show. That was the first one that was shared with me back in 2007. There was a guy who contacted me that he lived right there on the edge of the LBL. And one night, his wife was out with the girls. So he had the house to himself. It was just him and his dog. Well, he was upstairs. It was a 2-story home. And the way it was laid out was you could look right down the stairs and see through the kitchen to the back wall of the home. In other words, the back wall of the kitchen, and see a door right there that you could walk out to the backyard. Well, this guy had a big dog, and he said he had a doggy door for him. Well, one night when his wife was having a girls' night out, like I said, he was laying in his bed watching TV, he said, and all of a sudden he heard something that it sounded strange. It just didn't sound right. So he turned down the volume of the TV and just laid there listening. Didn't hear it. So he turned the volume back up, and after a short while, he heard another strange sound. So he thought, what in the world? So he turned down the volume again and was listening. Nothing. So he turned the volume back up, and he's watching TV again, and finally he heard it the third time. Well, third time's the charm. He decided to turn the volume down, get up, and walk to the top of the steps and look down. Well, to his horror, he saw what turned out to be this dog man that was apparently trying to get through the doggy door. One shoulder and one arm and its head were through, but its shoulders were too wide for it to be able to fit the other shoulder through. So it was hitting on the door. And that just makes you wonder, what would it have done if it would have made it into the home? But then again, something that's lost on a lot of people, and I make sure I bring this to the attention of a lot of eyewitnesses who contact me who are having trouble coming to terms with their experiences. There's not a door that's going to stop a dog man from getting in that wants to get in. There's not a window that's going to stop one. If they have any kind of size to them, there's not a wall on your home that's going to stop one that wants to get in. So, I mean, I don't know if it was doing that for full effect to try and frighten this guy. I really don't know what was going on with that, but yeah, that's a pretty unnerving thing to think about.
Yeah, that would be a definite, time to board up the doggy door. I've heard that story before. I didn't realize it was the same one I had heard, but yeah, I've heard that story before. It's very compelling. If I had come around the corner and saw that halfway through, I know exactly what I would have done. I'd have mag dumped and reloaded.
Well, just be sure you can kill. If you're going to shoot one of these guys, make sure you can kill them, because they've got a sense of vengeance like you wouldn't believe.
Oh,
if he's coming in a doggy door into my house, then obviously he don't have the best intentions in his mind. At least that's the way I'm going to look at it.
If I have to go toe to toe with one, and I hope I don't ever have to, but if I ever have to, if it gets me, they're going to find what's left of me in a pile of empty brass, because I am not going down without a fight.
I understand.
Vincent Ellison says, do dogmen have retractable claws?
I heard that put out there by an eyewitness. I don't know if that's accurate or not. All I can do is guess. I've only heard one person put that out there, that they do have retractable claws. As long as their claws are, though, think about a cat. A cat can retract its claws to the point where they're inconsequential. They don't really do anything. They can walk across your leg and not scratch you or anything. But these guys, they have talons that are so long. What's the benefit to them being retractable? I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, canines, there's no species of canine that can retract their claws. Most species of cats can, but canines can't. Monica Davis says, ask Vic about Ember the dog woman.
Oh, yeah. Had a guest come on a few times. Her name is Kim. She talked about this female dog woman that she saw several times, who, I guess if you want to put it like this, she had somewhat of a relationship with her. But I guess it was more of a situation where this dog woman tolerated her presence more than anything. But no, she would come home from her mother's house, and to get home somewhere there in Kansas where she lives, she would have to go through this part of the country where apparently it's pretty favorable for dog men to live, and apparently this dog woman to live. Well, on the most recent episode that she came on, she talked about seeing Ember again, and Ember, I'm sorry, 2 episodes ago, the second to most recent time she came on to tell us, to update us, that she saw Ember, and Ember had a baby bump, a pronounced baby bump. And then the most recent time she came on to talk about how she saw Ember, and Ember had the baby Dogman, the Dogman pup, on her back with her. So that's what she's asking about when she wanted to know about Ember.
That's kind of interesting. Hillary wants to know where you draw the line between Dogman and werewolf.
Well,
and what are things?
That's easy. I don't believe werewolves exist. There's a podcast out there who has this quote unquote expert who comes on, and he can tell you how many dogmen are in a given county in a state. He can tell you how many werewolves are in a given county in a certain state. Yeah, I don't buy that for 1 second. And supposedly
no way to know how many there are.
Oh, of course.
Yes, but that's what his is going to be just a wild guess.
Oh, of course. He claims to be an ex-government operative who has ties to programs, quote unquote programs, dogman programs and whatnot. But I mean, if there's any validity to that, he would be a goner by now. I mean, a long time ago. The moment you come out, if you actually are tied to a program like that, I mean, there's going to be history. Oh, definitely. So there's no veracity to that.
I had a guy try to tell me that he was a specialist with the Army Rangers, and that he hunted dogmen for the Army. And I was like, oh, really? I said, what was your MOS? Because I'm ex-Army. And he goes, oh, I was 0331. That's a heavy machine gunner. I said, yeah, it is, in the Marine Corps. That's not an Army MOS.
Imagine that.
And he didn't want to talk to me after that.
No, I'm sure. I don't doubt that. Yeah, it's a shame you have to deal with people like that. But no, because of that podcast, there are all sorts of lies floating around about dogmen out there. If you see something that looks like a dogman that doesn't have a tail, then it's a werewolf. If it has a tail, then it's a dogman, and all sorts of nonsense like that. Now, I'm not going to say that it's impossible that werewolves could exist, because in this crazy world, what can't be the truth? What can't be out there? But that's just something that, I don't know, I'd have to see a werewolf to actually believe that they actually are out there. But like I said, I'll never say that it's impossible that they exist.
Well, the one that I saw, I was so focused on its head that I had to really think about whether or not I even saw a tail, because I was so focused on the shape of the head. I was just astounded at what I was looking at. And when it realized I had seen it, then it took off. And like you said, it was incredibly fast. And I was with another guy, with a friend of mine named Nick Valente, and I'm like hitting Nick in the arm and pointing, and he saw it. I got to look. I saw it for probably between 15 and 20 seconds, and Nick probably got a good 10 seconds before it realized we knew it was there, because it was standing in the shadows. And when it realized we had seen it, it turned and headed for a ravine. And it did this. It didn't do it like a straight run like a person. It did this weird kind of bounding run, like went to the right, went to the left, went to the right, and then straight down that ravine. And we could hear it busting branches and really, really hauling butt down through the woods. Of course, we jumped out of the car and took off running after it like idiots. But it didn't take us but a few seconds to realize there ain't no way we were catching it. So I went over to the tree where I'd seen it standing, and I put my hand where its hand was. And like, if you lean up against a tree, you tend to put your hand about shoulder level, because that's just kind of the natural position to put it. And basically, based on where its hand was next to a branch, when I put my hand up there, I could reach the spot, but it was uncomfortably high for me, like higher than I would lean against a tree. So I kind of estimated its height between like 6.5 and 7 feet tall. It wasn't massive. It was built lean like a dog on its hind legs, but it definitely had hands.
Oh, sure. No, I believe it. Yeah, I wish I could have seen you guys bailing out and trying to catch it. It's just like the dog chasing a car. What are you going to do if you do catch it?
Well, we were unarmed. I mean, we went tearing off into the woods, and we could hear that thing beating through the bush down heading toward the lake. And I looked over at him. I'm like, "You carrying?" He said, "No, I thought you were." I'm like, "No." And we're running through the woods chasing this thing without a firearm. Maybe we ought to reconsider this plan. And so we started backing off and realized that where it had gone down in that ravine, there's no way we'd have gotten down there without equipment anyway. It was just too steep. So we backed up, and that's when I went over and checked the tree, and you could see the impressions in the leaf litter where it had ran, but the leaf litter was so thick there was no way to cast anything.
Oh no, I believe it.
But speaking of canine casting, Robbie and I found it. Well, Robbie found it. I was there when he found it. I came over like a few seconds after he found it and called me over there. We found about a 7-inch canine track here in Missouri down by the lake, by Table Rock Lake.
A 7-inch track. Well, that's interesting. So that you
Big
know,
track.
yeah, that is. Well, that's not nearly as big as they can get, as Dogman prints can be, but people ask about the whole print side of things. Well, understand that the biggest canine print that's ever been found was left by a wolf. It was 6 inches long by 5 inches wide. That's the upper. That is a big print, definitely. Well, yeah, if you found something that was 7 inches long or anything bigger than that, that kind of narrows down on the possibilities and what it could have been. Something to think about.
Yeah. And the even scarier part about that is the night before we were out there, we saw eyeshine.
The eyeshine was easily about 8 feet off the ground when we saw it.
So, and we had already found what we believed to be a Bigfoot track earlier. So we're like, okay, we'll come back in the morning, we'll cast it. So that's what we were doing back over there. We get back over there, and somebody had driven a car through the one and only track, and there's a whole story behind that. But getting to that, we're like, okay, we're here. Let's just go walk around and see if we can figure out, where the eyeshine was that night or the night before. So me and DA's son Noah, this was before DA had his heart procedure done, so he was still kind of rough on him to walk around. So he just sat on this big rock, kind of kept his eye open for us. So me and Noah kind of worked our way around, went up the hill, up this little draw, and come back down on the side of the draw in this little saddle. And then I looked down and I saw this little game trail. I told Noah, I said, well, let's go down and look at that game trail. Because if something big was moving, it's going to be moving either on or around that game trail. So we found a couple places that looked like something had, like a log that looked like something had stepped over it and knocked some bark off of it. We're looking on, I see some places up kind of high on a tree. It looked like something may have had a hold of it, was rubbing some bark a little bit. Well, I look up and look across the game trail, and the best way I can describe it is like if you take a bird's nest and instead of it sitting like this, turn it and sit like that, something had woven all these limbs and branches and all this stuff together, and it looked like a bird's nest sitting on its side. So I told Noah, I said, go over and get your dad and bring him over here so we can show him this. So DA comes over, we start looking at it and talking at it, and I said, that looks like a hunting blind, basically. And, I'm not small by any means, but I got inside this thing, Vic, and I stretched my arms out to both sides, and I still had about 1.5 to 2 feet on either side, and I could reach all the way up and still not touch the top of it. So whatever had made it was pretty big.
It looked like a bird's nest that was sitting on its side. It was all branches woven together and everything, and just right here, just off that game trail where it could slip back inside that little nest. But it was on its side upright, where it would be easy to just crouch down in it.
So while I'm in there, I got to thinking. I said, well, let's test this theory out. So I told D, and I had on camouflage pants, but I had a black pullover and a camouflage hat, ball cap, just like this. And I told DA, I said, turn around, go back up to about 15, 20 yards, go back up the trail and walk back down this way and tell me when you can see me. Now, he knew exactly where I was at, knew what I was wearing, and knew what to look for. He goes up the trail about 12 yards, turns around, and cannot see me, even though he knows where I'm at. Walks down, and he said he was literally within like 5 feet of me before he finally could see me.
So if I'd been on that game trail and not known something was there, I'd have been on top of it before I'd ever would have seen it.
So while we were sitting there talking about it, I'm kind of on my knuckles like this, just kind of looking up and talking to them. I look down in between my hands and I'm like, what? And I start kind of brushing leaves off the side. And DA's like, no, don't tell me you found another track. I said, what does that look like? That's all I said, pointed down. DA looked down and said, that's a big dog track or a big wolf track one. So and this was like right where we saw the eye shine the night before, like right next to it. So I think whatever we saw was using that as a hunting blind, right? Because it was right off that little game trail.
Yeah, sure sounds like it. That'd be a great spot.
The last time I was down there, that was still there too. That hunting blind.
No, I believe it.
What do you believe is the most bizarre story you've ever heard of either Dogman, Bigfoot? The most bizarre story you've heard about a cryptid?
Wow, that's a really good question. When you've heard as many stories as I have, it's just so hard to pick and choose. I've heard some dandies. As far as you said the strangest?
Yeah, the most bizarre.
Well, so many of these stories, they involve paranormal elements, and whenever paranormal elements are involved, I mean, it's a pick 'em basically. So I'm having a hard time even just coming close to picking one for you. It's almost like a blur. Understand though, I guess I should put this out there. I don't bat an eye if I have 3-4 brand new Dogman eyewitnesses contact me in one day. Some days it gets as crazy as having 7, maybe 8 brand new Dogman eyewitnesses contact me who I've never heard from before. So just imagine the volume I deal with. I mean, it's hard to keep details straight from this encounter to that encounter. That's really a hard question for me to answer. I really can't answer that one for you.
Well, there's kind of a follow-up to it. This might narrow it down a little bit. Why do you think so many Dogman sightings are in or around cemeteries?
Well, if they do have a paranormal quality to them, that would explain a lot. But that's one of those things where I have no idea. All I could do is guess on that. Maybe, well, don't lose sight of the fact that Anubis was supposed to be, and I guess is supposed to be, the guardian of the underworld, the gate to the underworld. And what does Anubis look like? Although Anubis is supposed to have hominid-style legs, not canid-style legs, but I don't know. Maybe that's because they are supernatural in origin, and the graveyards obviously have people who've passed on. Maybe that's what's behind it. I don't know. All I can do is guess on that.
Yeah, that's, I think, pretty much any of us can do. I've wondered that if it's not, you know how they can use dogs to search cadavers. I'm wondering if they might, be near and around graveyards because they smell decay or death.
That might be the case, but wow, it's really hard to say. The decay, I mean, you think about the bodies would be in a casket, and the casket's inside of a vault, and then it's buried.
Well, modern ones are. A lot of those graveyards are very old, like the ones in LBL.
Oh,
I don't think half of those had vaults and even had modern caskets. Probably most of them were pine boxes at best.
And I can appreciate that, but if you're talking about an old graveyard, then you're talking about bodies that were put in the ground so many years ago that there probably isn't any decay going on. There is no flesh left. So, yeah, if it's new enough to have flesh, then the bodies are going to be in caskets that are in turn in vaults and then buried. It wasn't until just really recently that they started digging graves 4 feet deep instead of 6 feet deep. Until recently, all of them, as you know, were dug 6 feet deep. So they have all that dirt on top. Now, there are cadaver dogs that can smell bodies that are buried fairly deeply underground, but whether they can actually smell a body that's in a casket, that's inside of a vault, then it's buried 6 feet down, I don't know if even a cadaver dog could do that. So I don't know what to
I don't know
think
about the depth of that, but I know cadaver dogs. I've seen cadaver dogs locate bodies that had been in the ground for years.
Oh, no, I believe it.
It's amazing what they can train dogs to do.
Oh, definitely. But then again, those bodies, they're not in a casket that's in a vault. So maybe that's the dividing line. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
I think it's just very interesting that so many sightings are in or near cemeteries. I can't explain it. I've got a few ideas. Don't know if they're right or not, but it's just one of those things I find very bizarre and about their behaviors.
Oh, yeah, there's so many bizarre things about their behavior. It really is. And so that gentlemen, I'm going to need to get ready to get out of here.
We generally go about 2 hours, so we're getting close to where we would normally wind up anyway. We've got a few things we always do when we wind down. Before you go, tell everybody again where they can find you, and we'll hopefully send some folks your way, and maybe some of your folks will come our direction, and we sure appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really easy to find. If you've had a Dogman encounter that you need help with, then all you would need to go, if you want to speak with me, all you would need to do is go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report, and if you do that, then I'll contact you to schedule a phone consultation with you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot podcasts, Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio or my Bigfoot sighting, then please go to my bigfootsighting.com and send a guest request to me. If you do that, then I'll contact you to schedule a recording for the show that way. And I've got another podcast I started recently called Dogman Tales. It's got fictional stories about dogmen. And to be able to listen to that, you can just go to your favorite way to listen to podcasts and do a search for Dogman Tales. And Tales is spelled T-A-L-E. It's not spelled T-A-I-L. It's spelled T-A-L-E. If you do that, then you can listen to it that way. Dogman Tales is not available on YouTube, so that you know. So, yeah, that should make it pretty easy then.
Awesome. Well, Vic, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation. You've got a lot of information to share. Love to have you back sometime.
I'll just say the word and I'll be back. And like I said, thanks so much for having me.
It's our pleasure.
We appreciate it.
Hope you have an awesome night, man.
You too. Thank you.
Folks, make sure you follow the links that are in the chat. Again, we go over and make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Vic's channel. And you've got hours and hours and hours of some awesome entertainment. So definitely check that out. I want to thank you folks for hanging out with us tonight. We've had an awesome night. The chat has just been flying by. So this has been very, very, very cool. Having the OG of Dogman himself here has been pretty awesome. But folks, don't forget to check out our affiliates. Check out the good folks over at Dark Angel Medical for all your first aid and medical needs and trauma kits as well. And don't forget to use discount code DEA. I'm sorry, that's Cryptid20 for 20% off your order. That's Cryptid20. Also check out the good folks over at scallywagtactical.com. Scallywag Tactical's got your full range of knives and wilderness equipment. Check them out. They've got some amazing products, and use the discount code DARoberts10 for 10% off your purchase over there. And don't forget to check out our newest affiliate, SigwoArms.com. And for those of you who are interested in the Codename Wild Hunt series, I should have some videos very soon of them constructing my code name Wild Hunt AR that I'm going to be showing off on the channel. So I'll be sharing that with you guys, and you can go to sigwoarms.com and check out their site, and they've got pretty much everything you could possibly need for, in customs and in pre-built weapons. So check them out, let them know we sent you, and tell Cody we said to stop by. Don't forget to check out Robbie's books. You can find all of Robbie's books on Amazon.com. And you can find mine there as well, or you can find them at DAEroberts.net. And we are so thrilled you guys were joining us tonight. Again, don't forget to keep the folks in Texas in your prayers, and don't forget Mark Napier and his family as well. Mark was one of our first mods. He'd been with the mods for quite a while, so where a lot of us are dealing with that. And Mark was a good dude, and I really hate that we lost him. He was a heck of a guy. But watch the YouTube channels. I'm sorry, not the YouTube channels, the Facebook channels, because I will have funeral arrangements if anybody is in the area and would like to attend. So look for that on the Facebook channels. Folks, thank you guys for hanging out with us. And I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't mention the 22 a day foundation. Folks, we lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. So reach out to your friends and family who wore a uniform. Doesn't matter if they were active duty, if they were reserves, what branch they served, first responders, anybody that's worn a uniform. Reach out and let them know you think about them. Let them know you care. And let's get 22 down to 0. And as we wind her down, I'm going to close her out with the toast. And pretty proud of the toast. It's something that I'm kind of thrilled we started doing, and I want to keep doing for a good long time. And the toast is from an old Irish drinking song called The Parting Glass. And when you listen to the lyrics, it's talking about more than just saying goodnight at the end of the night. It's about raising a glass to the ones we've lost along the way. And you guys will raise a glass or something, doesn't matter what you're drinking. And the quote says, "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all." Slán Jamal, and we will see you guys on Saturday night. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAExMachina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.